Today we will see another aspect of urban geography, and which is urban residential differentiation and the various segregation measures. We call them index of segregation or index of isolation. So these are the measurement of segregation. So what is segregation or what is residential difference? That is quite visible from this opening slide. From this cover slide, you can easily see this is a photo of an urban area. We will see more of this in the upcoming slides in our upcoming discussion. As you can see in this slide, in this cover slide, it is very much apparent that this is not a rural place. So this is an urban place. This much is very much apparent. And you can see the nature of differentiation. You can see the nature of segregation. And the background, you can see the various skyscrapers, while in the front, you can see various jhuggis or jhopris or slum areas. Of them, some you can see as two-story, double-story, some as simple slums. So today we will see what is urban residential differentiation and what is segregation, why, etc., how it is measured, etc. Now, what is urban segregation? So it refers, over here it is written what it is. It refers to the differential location of social groups across categories of a social structure. Now we know there are various social structures in an urban area. What are the various social structures? We will see in the upcoming slides. So it refers to the difference according to social structures when there is a differential location based upon the social structure of the residents of the various categories of residents of urban area. We call it as urban segregation. You can see from this photo over here, from this diagram over here. Now, for example, in this map over here, you can see that there is very less segregation because over here the green buildings are very closely packed. So you can't say this is closely packed. So you can't say that it is segregated. It is not segregated, but it is isolated in its own area. This place is isolated in its own area. But if you can see over here, this map over here, you can say that this is segregated. Over here, you can find that there is one isolation over here, but then again, there can be various viewpoints of segregation. You can say this is segregated. Segregated how? It has been segregated, this particular place is segregated into a, for example, red zone. So this is a red zone segregation area. Similarly, this place over here, it is segregated into a green zone. Over here, for example, this place over here, this is a mixed zone. There is no particular segregation you can see. This is a perfect segregation of green zones. Again, if you see over here, this amount of segregation is not much as compared to here, this place or this place. Here the compactness of or segregation is much more. So we will see similarly over here, residential segregation. Over here, this place over here, it is segregated zone, segregated from this belt, from this zone. So we will see what are the various causes of urban segregation. So the first cause that we are seeing, it is economic. Now what is economic? As we all know that there is a basic difference between rich and poor. If you see economy, so based upon economy, we can say that there is a basic difference between rich and poor. So the richest sector will never prefer to stay near the poorer sector. That is very much evident. If you see around you, you can see that the richest sector and poorer sector, or the cover slide that I had shown over there, you had also seen that the richer, comparatively richer sector, they were in a separate segregated area, and the poorer sector were in a separate area. So rich and poor, they won't stay near to each other. Even the poorer sector, they cannot even afford the livelihood standard of the richer sector. So that is why they won't also go and stay in the richer sector. So, and in most cases, it is seen that the minorities who earn lower income, and obviously because of that they possess less wealth, they simply can't afford to live in the same neighborhood. And that is why that leads to primary segregation based on economy. Now, the second one is discrimination. What sort of discrimination? Racial, real estate, agents, etc. Now, let us see about the racial. Now, racial, there can be various forms of racial discrimination. There can be, as we see in the Western world or America, the black and white. Even recently, we heard news of how a black man was beaten to death. So, there is racial discrimination. Similarly, we have this evil of caste system in India. And in that, there is this problem of lower caste and higher caste. Now, in one of my previous lecture on urban geography, I had shown you in the evolution of urban geography, I had shown you how the various, how the generally in urban sectors, the various caste people, they generally stay. So in that you have seen that, for example, the central area belongs to the high caste, but then lower caste are generally, they are pushed to some corner of the village. So this, that is segregation. When they are pushed in some corner, so that is their segregated locality. Similarly, this is the segregated locality of the higher caste. Similarly, in real estate agents also, this is generally found in the developed countries. In real estate agents, they will prefer, for example, this is an area of mixed zone. And again, this particular area, the red zone, is the most posh area. This is the most sought after area. Economically, this is the most sought after area where high-end people or people with high income levels, they prefer to stay. Now, the real estate agents, they won't prefer that anyone from the middle income or lower income will stay over here. Supposing even if a middle income person can afford to stay over here, but generally the real estate people, agents, they won't sell, they won't help that person towards settling in this, because then that means that this area will be a mixed area, mixed zone of both the higher income and the middle income. They want to keep this exclusively for the higher income. Why? Because in that way, the value, the land value, the property value of all those properties inside this zone will be of very high value. So to keep it that way, they will never have a middle income or someone not belonging to this higher income group to settle in this zone. You can take the example of various localities of Bombay, like Bandra, etc. Now, the third one is preference. Now, preference is what? Preference is, the first is the voluntary self-separation. In many cases, we see that the minorities, they voluntarily self-separate themselves. They keep themselves segregated from the majority population. You can take the example of any sort of religious example, religious minorities. You can take the example of skin color minorities, like the blacks. The blacks, they prefer to stay in their own neighborhood. So you can, or even the caste system. So generally, when there is a minority population based upon ethnic, based upon or racial, based upon income, whatever, So when it is minority, then they self voluntarily they self separate themselves. And why they do so? They do so because this voluntary self separation is done because there are various kinds of benefits. Now these benefits, generally there are two types of benefits. Cultural, whatever benefits are there, you can divide that into two types, that is cultural and economic. Now when we say cultural, so when there are people of the same type in a particular location, then what would happen? There would be cultural integration. For example, take for example, since right now we are here in Mizoram, I will give you examples from you people. Supposing some of you want to take higher education from some cities like Delhi or Mumbai, etc. So when you go there, and supposing you don't prefer to stay in a hostel, you prefer to stay in some rented apartment, rented house, you can see over there that generally people of the same cultural group, like for example Mizo, the Mizos will try to always stay with each other. Same goes for the other people also, not only Mizos, the Bengalis. Even they would try to segregate themselves, separate themselves into a separate place. Like for example, the Chittaranjan Park in Delhi. You can find a high number of Bengali population over there. So this applies for everyone, not only a particular race. This applies to every kind of race. When we are at a minority at some place, then what happens? And this applies to religious minorities also. You can take the example of the religious minorities of India, like for example, the Christians, the Muslims. So they will always prefer to stay self-separated, self-segregated from the majority population, because that would be, they will find themselves more protected when they stay together with their own cultural people. So that would be cultural integration. Similarly, because they want to live close to the other members of the same group. Similarly, there would be various kinds of job contacts also. For example, you take any sort of slums, or you can take any sort of minority place, minority segregated place. So over there you will find that the various, though quantitatively there will be various kinds of economic activities, maybe qualitatively not much, but quantitatively various economic activities. And in most of the economic activities that is found inside that slum or inside that minority ghetto, so over there you can see that the owners are belonging also to the same group, and the employees are also belonging to the same group. So there is, through job contacts are developed. So that is why also they prefer voluntary self separation. Next is violence. Now, for example, this place over here, this place over here is a place where there is too much of violence goes on. Then what would happen? Then the people would segregate themselves into some other locality, because they won't want themselves or next generation to grow up in that violent atmosphere. They will segregate themselves. They will move away from that zone. You can take the example of the recent violence against done by the ISIS people. When you see world politics, so you will see that the recent violence by the ISIS people. Or for example, if we take the example of Kashmiri Pandits. Now the Kashmiri Pandits, who were once the sons of the soil of Kashmir, they were forced to move out of Kashmir because of violence, and then they segregated themselves into various localities in Jammu. They were forced to move out of Kashmir, and when they moved out of Kashmir, they self-segregated themselves, self-separated themselves in various localities of Jammu. So this is how violence also results in self-segregation or urban segregation. Next is urban renewal. Now, when we have urban renewal, then what happens? There are various sectors of the urban place gets renewed. Various sectors gets renewed. When the various sectors gets renewed, then what happens? When it is replanned, when it is again planned, then what happens? Then uh, various cultural facets of the city, of the urban area, various economic facets of the urban area, or the social, according to social structures, various categories of that urban area, they segregate themselves into the various sectors. Now, what are the types? Now, we have seen what are the causes. Now, what are the types of urban segregation? The first type that we see is the ethnic type. Now, what is ethnic type? Generally, it is this kind of uh, type of urban segregation occurs through forces within the city. Now, what do we have within the city? We have people residing within the city. So, how it affects? So, when we have people residing within the city, we have various kinds of ethnic differentiation. For example, skin color is an ethnic differentiation. We have racial, we have caste. So these are the various forces which emanates from within the city, because it occurs through the components of the city. Components of the city means the various people, the population. So when we have these problems, that is the caste, that is the skin color, the racial, etc., then we have this ethnic sort of segregation. I have already told you about detail how this racial, caste, etc., they occurs, they results in segregation. You can also see over here this picture. Now, state policy. Actually, this picture relates to this state policy. In many places, it is the state policy which leads to segregation. Now, in erstwhile USA politics, US politics, erstwhile, not right now, but erstwhile, they had something like this: waiting room for colored only. That is over here, the colored, that is blacks, etc. They would stay. For the whites, there would be a different place. And what is written by order? The police department. So, police department works under what? It will obviously work under the state policy. So, the state policy also leads to these kinds of ethnic segregation. Or for that matter, you can also in various countries, like for example Pakistan, over there in various Muslim countries, you can see that there are various segregated areas, localities where only the minorities are meant to stay over there. So that is state policy. Now this leads to what? Ghettos and concentrated areas. So in these areas, these segregated people, they will stay. Generally, the minorities will stay. Now, what is ghetto and this consolidated area? I have told detailed about this in my previous lecture of ecological approach. So you can see, check that again to know about ghetto and consolidated areas. The second one is economic type. Now, when we say economic type, poverty. The poverty in the cover slide only you have seen, in the cover slide of this lecture, you have already seen how poverty leads to this kind of leads to segregation, urban segregation. Now, commuting. Commuting, try to remember the sector theory and the concentric zone theory. That is also a type of segregation. The sector theory and the concentric zone theory or the multiple nuclei theory, etc. These are also a type of segregation. Over there, various parts of the city were segregated into residential, into high class residential, etc., etc. So that is also a part of economic segregation also, or ethnic segregation also. Not ethnic, I should say economic segregation, because that depends upon poverty and commuting. So poverty, why? If you remember the low class people, low class residential area where it was, and if you also remember the high class or the commuter zone where it was. So based upon commuting and poverty also segregation depends. This is a model. What it is shown over here. Now this one model has been taken from erstwhile apartheid Africa, when they had this problem of black and white problem. Now as you can see over here how it is segregated, this zone or the CBD zone has been segregated into numerous things. Now this is the Indian CBD. As you know that in South Africa there are a lot of Indians, so Indian CBD. Now this white zone is the white CBD. This is the industrial, okay, but this zone has been segregated only as the blacks will live over here. No other place they can live. Black will live. This C and I, or this I or C, is the zone of the colored people or the Indian group people. This is the zone of the workers that is within the blacks. So the blacks were generally used as workers. The rest of the zone dominated by the white people. And as you can see, these are the zones with high socioeconomic status. Middle socioeconomic status, generally it is dominated with high socioeconomic status. But if you can see over here, this is a low and this is a low socioeconomic status. So this leads to this area, that is the Indian group or the colored group. This leads to this. But we have a buffer zone over here in the form of a river, and there is a buffer zone over here. So the lower income group within the white people, they have been pushed towards the segregated zones. So this is how the apartheid, in the model apartheid city, that how things works in the apartheid. Now over here, we will see about the various measurements, how it is measured, how will we know whether it is segregated or not segregated. So what is evenness? Evenness is benchmark distribution against which segregation is measured. Try to remember the second slide when I had shown you some model pictures, model map of the green and the red building. So over there, evenness, if it is evenly distributed, then we see we can measure what kind of segregation it has. And if it is not evenly measured, then also we can measure that what is the how much is the segregation index. Now this segregation or evenness can be measured by, first of all, it is index of dissimilarity. The first of all, it is index of dissimilarity. Now what this is, it is the most common measure of evenness of interpretation of segregation. And what is its definition? It is a measure of the evenness with which two groups are distributed across a geographical area that make up a larger area. Go through this definition once more. I will make you understand this through some examples. Next, what we have is the second measurement index, which is index of isolation. This is another measurement of segregation, and this is generally used for racial segregation, to understand racial segregation. There's a third one, which basically we use these two, dissimilarity index and isolation index. Based upon the various things, there's a third one, which is the model developed by Massey and Denton, which discusses based upon various degrees of various components. Now here, I will give you the example of index of dissimilarity through this. Now over here, let us imagine that these are the A, B, C, D. These are the four groups. These are the four groups or four wards inside a city. This is whole a city. Within city there are four parts, four wards A, B, C, D. Now total in this city, for example, we have 100%. These are the two racial groups, and this group, the brown people, the colored people, they occupy 25% of the total population. That means 25% of total population is 100. That means 25. Total, we have 25 people of this category, So the rest 75 obviously comes to this category. Total we have 100%. Now you see the distribution of these people is not same throughout. Here we have 7 people. Just take for just for an example, each and every of this sector has 25%. This has 25, 25, 25, 25. So of this 25, 7 are of colored, brown colored person. But here we see it is not the same. 3 are only brown colored. Here only 1 brown colored. Here there is 6 brown colored. We will see how this works out. So over here, we see that this is the formula of index of dissimilarity. So what is the meaning? I over here means neighborhood, that is A, B or C or D, that I have shown in the previous slide. A, this A and this B, it means the number of people of group A and group B that live in the census area I, that live in this place. Capital A and capital B means the total number of people in group A and B that live in the city as a whole. And this means that vertical bars means that we need to deduct this from this. Now see how this will run. Now for example, if we go to this previous slide, so let us take the example of this, that is this 7 people. So when we take the example of this this ward A, then what happens? So this over here there are 7 people. So if we have 7 people, then what happens? Total there are how many? I have told you 25. So when we divide 25 minus 7, then it will come to how much? It will come to 18. So then there are 18 discolored people and 7 discolored people for this particular area. Now how can we do this? How to do this calculation? Now for doing this calculation, now let me take this. So try to remember what it was said. A1 AI by A. So AI by A means how much? So it is 7 divide by total there are how many? 25 brown colored people. So that yields how much? 0.28 for A by total capital A. Then we have what? We have B by B. So B by B means what? 18 divide by how many this thing? Total B over there. The total B are 75. Total B means I have already said total living in that city. So 75. So that will yield to what? 0.24. So when it is 0.24, so earlier what we had obtained? 0.28. So 0.28 minus 0.24, this yields 0.04. So 0.04 is our dissimilarity index, or we can also say that this we can also multiply this with 100 to get a percentage. So when we will multiply it by 100, so what we will get? We will get the percentage of dissimilarity or the percentage of 0.04. So the percentage of 0.04 would be how much? You can calculate it. I am not again opening the calculator. You can calculate it. How much is 0.04 percentage? Just simply multiply that with 100. It will come as 4. So 4 is only the measure of segregation. So that much it is segregated, or A is segregated only or only 4% area. A occupies only in 4% area. That is that dissimilarity index of A is 4% or 0.04. This is a table for a city. So for this city, we have the sub area population of A and B. For A, this is the population 110, 100, etc. This is the B's population. So based upon the same formula, If you can see, the total is 250, so 110 by 250 yields to this. So you can do this formula, and based upon that total for that city, it has come as 1.48. So based upon the various parts, so you just, what you have over here, the various parts, so you calculate how I have shown this, then you get the index of this and this, and then you do what? Then you add all these up for the total dissimilarity index for that particular city, and you get 1.48. For example, it is 1.48 over here. So for the city as a whole, the dissimilarity index is 1.48. You can or you cannot multiply it 100 to get the same thing in percentage. This is the dissimilarity index of certain cities of India. So this shows the various ward wise, this shows what is the dissimilarity index of each ward for the whole city. Now we have the index of isolation. This is the formula of index of isolation. And what it is? This. It is a measure of the segregation of the activities of multiple population, invented by this person, and it generally studies racial segregation. And this is the this says about this various what is x and what is t, etc. Now we can also do the same thing. We can take the example that I had given of that ward, of that city, of A, B, C, D, and then we can do the same calculation based upon this formula. But this is different thing. This is index of isolation. Index of isolation is different from index from segregation index. Both are different.
This is the formula wherein x, small x, this means the number of people in group A of that area. So here in our case it is A, B, C or D, and divide by capital X. So what is capital X? It is written over here that is the total number of people of group A in the entire city. So for our case it is 25. We have 25 people of brown indexed people. And what does the small t mean? That is the total population of each area. Again, the total population of each area is 25. I have shown this in the previous slide. So if you divide small x, divide by capital X, so it will be, let us take the example of D. So in D, as you had seen in the earlier slides, it has 6 brown person. So that means, or 6 person of category brown. So that means 6 divided by total X, that is total, in total there are 25 brown group people. So 6 divided by 25 multiplied by 6 divided by total population. How much is the total population in each of these wards? That is 25. So 6 divided by 25 into 6 divided by 25, that is you will get 0.24 into 0.24. So that will be around 0.05. So that is the index of isolation. You can multiply that with 100. So you will get 5. That means the group X or brown group in D, they are 5%. So the in isolation percentage is just 5. Now next on, we see the effects of isolation. Now these are the various effects of isolation. The first being home value appreciation. Now it is very natural that a place which is got segregated people, which has got minority group, like for example the picture that you have seen over here. Now obviously of an apartment which is constructed, which is being constructed or which exists in the posh areas or the high-end places, obviously the appreciation will be much more. But a region which is being built or which is present in a relatively minority area or a relatively area which is like the example over here, this picture over here. So if it is in the slum area, then obviously there will be depreciation of the value. And in a segregated locality, particularly if it is if generally the various the minority people they are living, then what will happen, the condition of living will be obviously low. You can take the example of all the ghettos where the minority people they are living. Even the housing quality will also be very bad. Similarly, poverty and livelihood. Now see, poverty and livelihood, both of these goes hand in hand. Now, it is very much obvious that there are a number of economic activities in the slum areas. So, there is no confusion about that. Number of activities are there, but whether or not this activities gives high return, high turnover, that is the question. Now, take for example a barber and a hairdresser. You won't find a hairdresser in a low segregated area. Similarly, you won't find a barber in a high-end colony. So, but if you just think about this, that the both of them do the same job, but the return from both of them varies a lot. So, also what happens, the variety of livelihood is also halted. For example, if a person who may be very good in something, maybe he is a very good chef. So, because of racial prejudice, maybe that person won't get his job in the high end colonies. Then, livelihood can themselves be a source of discrimination and stigma. Now, how is this? Take, for example, the various menial jobs like the jamadars or the garbage removers. So, these things are the sweepers. So, they do a wonderful job. But do we look towards them with the same respect that we look towards the doctor or a CEO? We don't. Although the doctor, they are also the doctor of the society for the cleanliness. But then we don't look towards them with the same respect. And obviously, a segregated locality, particularly a locality having more poverty, they will have more concentration of poverty, like you are seeing over the picture over here. And when that is there, then obviously the quality of livelihood will also be less. Now, education. See the picture over here. Do you think that the students, that the kids on the right side of the frame will enjoy the same kinds of facilities that the left side are enjoying? Obviously, no. And then a student or a children or the kids, they develop best when what is written over here, multiple environments and cultures. So when you get access to multiple environments, multiple cultures, then what happens, then the development occurs, there is wholesome development. But since because of segregation, children are isolated from this opportunity, so this leads to a lopsided development. Then there is less access to quality education. Now again, this picture over here, do you think that the students who are in segregated zone or the students in or the schools in the various slums, can they give quality education? So you have the answer. Now crime. Now see, the birthplace of crime is poverty. So that is why you can see the various underworld people, underworld characters, they have all developed basically from these segregated localities. Then mortality. In these zones, because there is the policymakers, because they are not much of a vote bank, so these policymakers are hardly interested towards them. So we see a lack of mortality among them, or less or more mortality among them. The slide over here, this shows the life expectancy at birth. Now you can see over here that the poorest have the least expectation of at birth, life expectancy at birth, while the richest have got more life expectancy at birth. Now, this is Douglas Massey and Nancy Denton in 1988. They developed their models based upon 5 parameters or 5 ways. The first one being evenness. Now, this model is not much used. The models that are used, I have already told you the models that are used, and these models that you are seeing over here, Douglas Massey and Nancy Denton, so they developed their models based upon the earlier models. The first one is evenness. So what that is, it describes the similarity in the distribution of groups across a neighborhood. And how it is measured? It is measured by the index of dissimilarity. Second, we have exposure or isolation. I have already told you about isolation. Now what that is, it captures the typical composition of neighborhoods where group members live. And now this is measured by the isolation index. Then we find centralization or concentration. So what is centralization? It is the degree to which the group members live close to the center of the city relative to the other groups. Try to remember the apartheid model city. So over there the centralization was mainly occupied by the white people. Then we find clustering. It is also a parameter related to degree. So it is a degree to which group members live in neighborhoods that are close together within the city. And then we have the concentration. It describes the extent to which a group lives in the restricted amount of urban space. That is, they do not spread out. If they don't spread out into an urban zone, but they concentrate in particular areas. The second slide that I had shown, the red buildings or the red points and the green points. So they had concentrated the red people, the red zones, they were concentrated at certain localities. So that is concentration. How the group members, they are staying in a restricted fashion instead of staying at a open spaced condition. They are staying at a concentrated fashion at a concentrated place. Now this is all about urban residential segregation, the various indexes, the types, the effects, etc.